Welcome to the Breath of Life podcast. I'm Yulia. Here, we explore the world and our place in it through the lens of interconnectedness. If we could feel part of the living world, not just intellectually, but in our bones, if our breath could sync with the larger rhythm of life, how would that change the way we live, work, and make decisions? Join me for conversations with people who live and work from that place.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Breath of Life podcast. Today, I'm talking with Eugene Terekhin, and the way I pronounce the name is because the name is Russian, and I am also from Russia. That's why it sounded probably a little bit weird.
It's so good to hear it pronounced correctly, because nobody pronounces it correctly here in the States.
So how do you pronounce it?
Well, when people read it in the States, they read it as Terekhin. So I'm going like, okay, whatever.
Yeah, it's a tricky one to pronounce in English. Yeah.
Yes, it is.
And we're going to be talking about something very, very interesting, and it's the energy and even magic of spoken language, or about things and effects from spoken language that maybe we are not aware of. Maybe we could even call it superpowers of a spoken language. So anyway, I'm really looking forward. And Eugene is a philologist, philosopher, and an author of quite a few books. And their names sound super interesting. But let me ask you to introduce yourself in a little more detail. Just how you came maybe to do what you do.
Mm-hmm. Yes, my name is Yevgeny in Russian. And I was born back in the Soviet Union days. Well, I have a master's degree in English and German, linguistics and philology. So, how would I introduce myself? Well, I've always been interested in seeing the unseen, meaning that even when we were growing up, I'm sure you can relate. I mean, in the USSR, we were told that everything is just two-dimensional. Basically, what you see is what you get. Like Marxism would say, and Darwinism would also say that we're just developed apes. There's nothing besides matter. Mm-hmm. All we see is, I mean, if you can come up to a tree trunk and touch it, this is reality. There's nothing beyond. There's nothing else there. I had a curiosity to see if there's maybe something invisible behind the phenomena, meaning that the phenomena themselves, like the visible things we see, the clouds and the earth, trees, the grass, everything like that. If it's just portals, into something else, something that reveals an invisible reality, invisible spirit behind it. And because on the intuitive level, I could pretty much feel, even when watching some of those old Soviet movies, I'm sure you know a lot of them, that even though people in the Soviet Union were taught that there's nothing but matter, it's not just matter that we see, but there's something really spiritual about all those heroes that we watched in those movies and read in the books as well. This interesting train of thought was developed slowly. I became a believer in 1993 and realized that there's a whole world, unseen world behind the visible phenomena. And slowly but surely, I got interested in the Inklings, the writers behind the Chronicles of Narnia, Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, and also the third person that I got really interested in was Owen Barfield, who was like a mastermind behind most of the Inklings, even though he didn't write a lot himself. He wrote quite a few books, but they're not as popular. But people are plunging into them right now and really discovering the ethos of where the the fantasy worlds that we so love so much, where they came from. And they came from a very, very interesting philosophy of language, which, by the way, C.S. Lewis and Tolkien, that's how they basically begin their worlds. Because C.S. Lewis's Narnia begins with Aslan, this lion who represents the God, the creator, and Christ at the same time.
You've said a few things that are very interesting and that for me are quite new. So one of my questions was, why so much interest in Tolkien and the fantasy world? Because on the one hand, that's the most popular genre, because there is something in us that longs for this world to be more than just matter, right? But
Exactly.
on the other hand, we usually brush it off. So yes, it's just fantasy. So at least we can indulge reading it. But what you're saying now is something different. So you discovered something deeper there.
Yes, totally. Interestingly, that Tolkien himself, in his essay on fairy stories, he actually explained that there is one part of fantasy which is an escape, but it's not escapism, because when a person is in prison, then escape is a really good idea. I mean, you just break out of the prison and into the real world. And what he's trying to say is that the reductionistic view of the world that Darwinism and Marxism gave us is a prison, because we refuse to see more than meets the eye consistently. Whereas the heart, as C.S. Lewis actually points out in his essay, The Weight of Glory, he says that each heart is smitten or wounded with beauty at least once or twice in a lifetime, to such a degree that we somehow realize that there's nothing in this physical world that can satisfy that longing. And that's a pretty good indication that we were created for another world, or that this world somehow has been damaged, pretty damaged, and so that we're really longing for our homeland, the forgotten homeland.
And this philosophy, you're talking about the philosophy of language. Can you just elaborate a little bit what that is?
Yeah. So basically, going back to how C.S. Lewis and how Tolkien began their world, so to say, how their worlds began, fantasy worlds. So C.S. Lewis had his lion sing Narnia into existence. Basically, there was nothing, and then out of nothing, a song appeared. And as the song progressed, different phenomena started appearing from out of nowhere. There were some children that witnessed the whole thing happening before their eyes. And so basically, as he sang, all the things were woven out of words, out of melodies and songs and words. And this echoes basically the biblical account of how the world came to be, because in the beginning was the Word. In other words, the divine God speaking was the thing that triggered all the things into being. And so in Tolkien's Silmarillion, it's like a prehistory of the Lord of the Rings. The same thing happens with music of Iluvatar. Iluvatar is like his word for God, or the father of all, basically. I think it relates to German Vater, Iluvatar. So Elevator also creates the great music. And in this great music, all things were first pre-thought as if in a vision. And all these themes were sung by the archangels called the Ainur in the story. So basically the idea is the same. When you look at a river, at a tree, you look at music that has been condensed into matter. But if you have ears to hear and heart to feel, heart to perceive and eyes to see, you will not just say, okay, this is just a bunch of wood out there that I can just burn in my stove. But it's actually condensed music. It's frozen music. And this relates very well with what German philosopher Martin Heidegger actually said. I've just written an article about that recently, how man dwells poetically in the world. By saying poetically dwelling, it doesn't just mean making poems about all things, which is certainly okay, but it's not what he means. Because the Greek word poesis is exactly the word used in the Greek translation of the book of Genesis, where it says, in the beginning, God created or made. So the word for created and made is poesis in Greek. In other words, this first initial act of speaking was the poetic word, and so God himself thinks poetically, and that's why for us to be able to commune or perceive that word in everything that we see is also an act of poesis, an act of dwelling poetically in this world. So it takes up some kind of a poetic mindset to be able to live poetically and perceive this initial original poesis in all things. So it's just the philosophy of language is actually, the term came to my mind when I just started my Substack a while ago. Actually, before that, when I was reading Owen Barfield, who was actually the first and the last inkling. Inkling is like have an inkling, have an idea, a little idea about something. But it has so many implications and connotations. But they call themselves the Inklings.
Something that you said about sound, there is a lot about how sound was central to creating matter, maybe creating the universe. And in this case, what I'm hearing is sound can be more than words, right? Words and languages, they're holding more meaning than just the meaning that we can ascribe.
Yeah, because there's a reductionistic view of language and words as well. Especially with the rise of AI, the confusion, I believe it's a huge confusion in people's minds, because for a lot of people, words are basically data, information. However, this view is really, really crumbles under scrutiny. Because, for instance, you and I are talking now, and what you are trying to do and I'm trying to do when we listen is we're not listening to data. We're not listening to just the things that are being said or the sound waves that come out of our mouths, right? But we're listening to what's behind it. In other words, every word is a carrier of living energy, of something that comes through words. But however, this modern technological consciousness tends to equate the sound wave or the data that comes out of my mouth with words. It's not true, of course. And Martin Heidegger actually spoke really eloquently about that when he said that language is the house of being, not labels on things. So for a lot of people, like if I say computer, people will think it's just a label on the thing, which called computer, but it's not. And actually, I think we see a lot of examples, and even in recent history, that in a lot of dictatorships, the dictator understands very well the power of words, that they are not just labels. Actually, it was Mao Zedong who said that. He said it to his opponents, political opponents. He said basically that, fools, you think that words are labels on things, but we know that they are little dynamite sticks in people's minds, and we hold the fuse. And so the Bolsheviks in 1917, first thing they did was they reformed the language, Russian language, and they introduced a lot of like contractions and abbreviations, and they eliminated and tweaked certain words, because obviously when you break the house, the being is not there anymore. If you break the house of being, language is house of being. If you break the house, there's no more. Also, I believe that you and I know from the history of the USSR how meaning is either destroyed or reduced or distorted through the wrong use of words, or like distorted use of words. It was Pavel Florensky, by the way, this Russian Orthodox priest who was killed in the Gulag in 1937, spoke a lot about how Bolsheviks distorted the language in the beginning of the 20th century in Russia. And he said that when they introduced that new language, like Nkvd or things like that, it sounded almost like splinter in the tongue. And he said that that's was done intentionally on purpose, because how words sound really matters, and that's one of the themes developed so well in Tolkien in the Elvish languages, because Elvish languages were truly magical by the way they sounded. And even it was power in the form, like morphology of the word. When people, like heroes in the story, when they hear elves speaking, for instance, they get healed or they get grace or things like that. And the other side also is true, like Saruman's voice had this power to mesmerize, hypnotize, and destroy through lies, and that he did that with his voice. So it's the same concept that basically words are just dynamite sticks in people's minds.
So you're saying one of the mechanisms, at least, that language has more superpowers than just meaning and can be compared to dynamite stick is the sound. Is there anything else? I think a lot of mystery in how we communicate or how we hear or how language lives. And I believe now that the first article of yours that I came across, it was about the energy of a language. And there was something there about sensing also.
Yeah, sensing. I don't quite remember exactly that article now, but I think I can pretty much restore it in my head now. Yeah, I would say that it's all about attunement, I would say. Attunement. For example, two people talking to each other, like you and I talk right now. Of course, we can perceive the data. And people who are going to watch this, they will perceive the data, right? But if they stop at the level of the data, they will not perceive or sense what is behind, what is beyond, what the energy that's being carried through that, through the words. So it is my desire to speak in such a way that, divine energy will flow and come out so that people can get grace, basically. And that's the whole idea in Tolkien's like Elvish languages. People get grace by hearing the sound. So yeah, and it's about sensitivity, developing this alignment and sensitivity to that energy. And for example, if I open my YouTube and I keep scrolling like 24/7 for some news from around the world, by the end of the day, I will have absorbed so many words, negativity, that by the end of the day, whether I like it or not, my mood will probably plummet, and I will be just my energy will be just destroyed. And if I choose to dedicate my time to hearing, the words of joy and light and gratitude and grace, basically, that's what I think what Heidegger meant by living poetically in this world, right? And I'm gonna have good people to talk to throughout my day. I'm gonna allow my mind and my heart to soak and absorb what comes through words, of course, not words themselves, but it's what comes through the external wrappings. And I also like to think that, even as Heidegger said, that language is the house of being. So we're really what really sense is that being. I think I once asked ChatGPT how it creates words, and it answered that basically I use statistical methods of like predictions and blah blah blah, that kind of thing. And I asked ChatGPT, can you feel? And he said, not really. I said, well, okay, that's really humble of you to say that. But whereas the two people, when we talk, if you can't feel or sense what's behind words, you don't really communicate. I mean, it's not communication. That's really a great divide between technology and human beings, because we are capable of communing beyond what we hear by sensing, and technology cannot do this. It is basically a modern day idolatry, I would say, because an idol, by definition, is something that arrests our gaze. something, for example, tangible and external that we look at and we say, this is the ultimate reality. This is the ultimate. There's nothing beyond it. So I look at matter and I say, there's nothing beyond it. So I deify matter. I make it a god, into a god. It's like an idol, basically. And so in the case of modern technology and modern, especially AI, it's really clear that people who deify data, they say there's nothing else to communication besides this. And this is a big problem that our children are going to face through all this confusion that's coming. It's already here, though.
Yes. So it's that this part about ChatGPT was there in that article on the energy. And exactly. So now going to my experiences, I can just sense when I see something written by ChatGPT, they feel somehow hollow. I don't know. This is what you were describing. And that also brings me to a point that a lot of people are saying, well, ChatGPT is neutral. Right? But hollow is not neutral. Hollow has a very specific act on you.
Yeah, it does act on you. Well, I believe Owen Barfield mentioned this in his book, Saving the Appearances. He talks a lot about, it's called Saving the Appearances, A Study in Idolatry. That's where he basically tackles this issue of an idol, like what it is. And in the ancient Hebrew, the whole idea of an idol, the word for an idol, means hollowness, something hollow, something that is devoid of essence. And this is really, I mean, anybody can feel that. For example, I mean, you and I, in fact, from the Soviet days, we can really say that the culture and the education, everything was basically teaching us, okay, there's nothing more to this world than meets the eye. I mean, and man is basically God. And yet, in our daily life, we could feel that there's more. We could tell that there must be more. And so basically the culture was creating this idol out of matter. Of course, so for a lot of people it was, but then their lives became hollow. And we could see that how this whole ideology hollows you out little by little. And that's really like almost I would say it's a spiritual influence. We can think idols are neutral, like a ChatGPT is certainly an idol. It's neutral. No, it's not, because it makes you hollow.
Yeah. And I interrupted you when you were talking about the Elvish language and that it's magical. So what makes it magical? And what is magic, if you have a definition?
Oh, yeah. Well, actually, magic is a really interesting word, because Tolkien himself and Lewis as well, they didn't favor this word very much. They used it, though, for the magic of the elves and even like good magic, blah, blah, blah. However, Tolkien actually writes in one of his letters that, how would I put this? That the magic is the art of the enemy, like of Sauron and Melkor, who's the other Satan figure. And basically, he called magic, he equated it with the machine, which is like the epitome of technology. And whereas he opposed it with the magic of the elves, he also called it magic, but he just made a point that it's not the same. It's a totally different type of magic. And basically, when he said, like, look at what happens when we use the machine. Like, for example, if I come up to any sort of machine, the machine doesn't ask me who I am. It doesn't care about what's happening with me internally, whether I have eyes to see or sensitivity to anything, whether I perceive reality or I don't perceive. It just wants me to push the button. And then it basically changes the outside world into my idea of how it should be. It basically helps me to do what I want quickly and as quickly and efficiently as possible. That's what the machine does. And that's pretty much black magic, because the whole idea of black magic is like, throw this stuff into the cauldron and then boil this thing. Black magic doesn't ask you who you are. You just do the right thing, the right ritual, and then you get what you want. That's basically the machine. That's the whole idea of modern technology. But the opposite thing in Tolkien's minds is the art of the elves. He calls it art or subcreation. It's a unique term which basically means that when an elf attunes himself or herself to this initial music of Iluvatar, this creative word, then they're able to create both through speech and their arts, create something like real things that have magical powers. But it's a different type of magic because it grows from inside. It grows from who you are. Like, for example, any artist, I mean, whether it's like a writer or like a painter or an architect, designer, whoever, I mean, when they really are in the zone or in the flow and they create, they're not following their own will. They try to attune themselves or sense something that comes from beyond, and they want to somehow reflect it in what they do. So that's basically the idea of Elvish magic, and Elvish speaking is part of that. Elvish language, Elvish words. That when we are attuned to that music of Iluvatar, then whatever we do, whether we, I mean, like make boats or bake bread. I mean, there was this magical Elvish bread called lembas that, you know, one little piece could feed like an adult, like a grown-up person for a whole day or something like that, fill up, you know, the stomachs. And there were a lot of other really magical things that elves produced, but the way they were produced was not the machine. It was not like a technology that was behind it, even though they used some techniques for sure. But it was art. And this opposition, this juxtaposition is really key to Tolkien. That, you know, the true magic of the elves is this attunement or the sensing. Because then when you attune and when you sense, something starts growing from inside out. And that's the key difference in Elm in how they viewed, the Inklings viewed these two types of magic. And so the Elvish tongue is really interesting, since you asked. The elves, when they appeared, they were not even created. They speaks about the awakening of the elves. They weren't created. They watched the stars for a long, long age at this bay of Cuivienen, and then one day they awakened and realized who they were. So that's all. There was no act of creation or something. And so that initial music, represented by Varda, who is like their goddess of the stars, lives in them, in the elves, in the heart of every elf. And so they try to reflect that initial moment of awakening in all they do. Not all of them, but many elves do. And so when they like started walking and talking in this world that was created, they walked and talked in such a way that things became alive. So, for example, the trees became alive and turned into Ents, you know, those shepherds of the trees. Mm-hmm. And then also in the Lord of the Rings, if you remember, there's this one moment when one Ent, whose name is Treebeard, kind of remembers this whole story and said that the old elves spoke to everything, and they did it in such a way that they made things alive. And that's pretty much the whole idea. Actually, when Tolkien writes about the way he even thought of creating, because he created the Elvish tongues, right? It was his creation. And he basically said, I just picked up a book of Finnish grammar, and I was so fascinated by the way it sounded, even just the sound, that I realized that there must be stories hidden behind these words and language. And so he decided to create Elvish tongues and then create mythology around that, basically how it sounds. So that's just, he literally says, I was intoxicated by the sound of that language. And then that's what he tries to give us through Elvish speech, because it is poetic speech. And if you've ever been touched by a line of poetry, you understand what living word means, because it's like Owen Barfield said, it's a felt shift of consciousness that happens when we're touched by a living metaphor. we realize that something has worked on our consciousness from outside in, and we don't even know what happened.
Yeah. Well, as you were saying this, I was getting goosebumps because yes, I had those experiences where just a couple of words coming together, and I've heard each of these words independently, but there is something about these words together, probably my state, probably what's going around me. So a lot of different things come together in a moment, and all of a sudden you have this, wow.
Yes, exactly.
As you were talking about the Elvish language in creativity or in innovation, the dominant paradigm has been that I am the hero. Of course, all innovative decisions and all creativity, it's me who's been driving this progress, or at least not me, but I'm with my fellow human beings. But now more and more, there is this field that's called emergent creativity that is saying, well, actually, creativity is a universal act and it's happening every moment. And the fact that some idea got through you doesn't even necessarily mean that you had a lot to do with this idea.
Exactly.
A lot of different things came together.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very curious about the Inklings. What are your insights of how they were creating? Because to me, it feels like from what you were describing, this only could have been done like in co-creation, but also something maybe got channeled through them. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Well, I do believe that for sure. Yes. I believe they were channeling this initial energy of creation, divine energies that we can also see because they're still visible. I mean, we can sense, I would say, we can sense them through the things that were created, by observing everything through the lens of like poetic mindset. We can sense that initial energy that is here and is able to touch us and transform us from inside out. But speaking of this, what Tolkien actually called it subcreation. Sometimes the word co-creation is used, which I'm really fine with that term as well. But I like subcreation because sub means under, and meaning that when I create, I am not the hero. I'm not the one creating, but I'm under something. Even the word understand, in English at least, carries this interesting thing because you really have to understand, you have to stand under. Like to really understand what rain is, you have to stand under the rain. We don't understand cognitively. Just, if you tell me, for example, something, I've never been to Berlin, but if you tell me about Berlin, I have some idea or an image, but it's not the same as me going there, right? So to understand Berlin, I'll have to stand under Berlin, meaning it has to be an overarching reality which I look at and it transforms me just by its ambience, by its presence. So that's the word understand. And so subcreation, I think that's really key to the Inklings, because Tolkien himself said that we create in the law in which we were created. So first we discover that law, like the Tao, the way, we understand it, we attune to it. And then from that, our creation flows. The best, for me personally, the best metaphor is a leaf trembling in the wind. Because when we look, like in the fall, we look at a tree, like an aspen, for instance, where the leaves are really trembling with even with a light wind. What you see is like it feels like when this leaf is trembling, it feels like the leaf is doing so much. It's energetic, right? But at the same time, when you think about it, you realize that the leaf is not doing anything. It's simply under the wind, under the weather, etc. And we perceive it. The outsiders perceive it as dance, the dance of the wind, of the dance of the leaf, especially when it's torn off the branch and it flies in the air. It performs all these pirouettes and somersaults and all kinds of things in the whirlwind. But at the same time, we realize it's not doing anything. It puts itself under that thing which moves it. And so that this whole idea was really key for the Inklings to put ourselves in a place where we can be moved. And that place is beauty, because beauty moves. Like true metaphors, they move. They're moving and they move. You like the leaf. Also, another thing, I think it relates to the whole idea of subcreation. I like the way you mentioned it, that, and this whole idea of creativity. I mean, the tendency is to put yourself as in the center, but that's actually black magic, if you think about it, because the main driving force in black magic is my will be done. I want something done, and I find tools to get it done quickly and efficiently. Whereas in subcreation, it's the opposite. It's actually thy will be done. So it's basically works as this prayer that happens. It's like a prayerful mindset where you deny your will, your own self, your little self. You kind of put it off. You shut it off, right? And you attune to this divine light, to the divine will out there. And you say, okay, I want this will to be done through me. I want to sense it and somehow reflect it in what I do. And that is the essence of this prayerful or, poetic activity that transforms everything, as opposed to my will be done. When I take a tool or take any piece of technology or anything, and I say, okay, I'm thinking I want to create this and this. What do I need? I need this and that. But you can do this, but it will be hollow in the end.
Yeah, and this is kind of what we have been trained, taught to do. Well, maybe not in the Soviet Union, because it's not me. But it's the collective.
The collective, exactly.
But still, the collective, or it's me who is responsible for everything and takes the blame and takes the credit for doing something. And what you are saying, for the words to work their magic, the shift needs to start there, from that point of where I am, and to be under something, or to feel under something.
Yeah. I remember I read it somewhere about this famous picture by Van Gogh, the picture of a chair, that's worth like millions of dollars right now. But, whoever wrote this, I forgot where I read it. He said basically the actual chair is worth like a couple bucks, maybe $10, the most. But what Van Gogh saw through in that chair, and actually was able to paint it and reflect it, is this some sort of energy that came through that chair, and he sensed it, and he put it into his painting that we want to pay 10 million or like $100 million for. And that's just in itself like an illustration of this magic that you just mentioned, that when you deny your little self, put it off, and you see what comes through, whatever it is that you observe in the visible world, right? It's a chair, it could be something else, it could be a person, could be anything. Magic happens. People are able to get transformed by seeing it.
Exactly. And also, so you mentioned prayer, and that was also one of my questions. What is the prayer about? Are there any special laws or principles used, for example, in putting together prayers? Or what kind of your take on this? I know from my studies of breath work, I'm a breathwork coach, that with these prayers, a certain rhythm of breath evolves, and it's called coherent breath. And it's the breath that's considered to create coherence between all the organs and tissues inside of you.
Yeah, I get it.
But there are other things as well that magic.
Yeah. It's certainly magical. Well, prayer is such a vast subject, to tell you the truth, and it's I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it justice in a few words, but uh, but the way you explained it right now with the breath, it really is that. I remember. Have you ever read what's it called? Anne of Green Gables. Anne of Green Gables. It's like a children's story. A long time ago. So basically, she's like an orphan, and she is adopted by this family in Canada. You know, it was back in probably more than 150 years ago, but it's a fictional story. And so the lady that adopted her is like a devout Christian. So she asks, "And do you pray before bed?" And she said, "No, not really. Like I had a disagreement with God over something, the color of my hair or something. Since then, I don't care for him." And so this lady says, well, as long as you're under my roof, you're gonna have to learn some prayers. So she gives her a prayer, and she said, "Okay, yeah, no problem. I'm gonna say anything you want me to say." But then she adds, "But if it were up to me, I guess I would have just gone out into the field and I would have lain down on the grass and just feel the prayer coming through me." And when I first read that, I thought, isn't that it? Because when we think of prayer as something we do, but it's actually something that's being done in us and through us when we allow this divine energy to come into us through the beauty, wherever we can get it. And then something opens up. And as you say, for sure, our breath becomes coherent because it aligns with the initial breath, pneuma in Greek, the breath of God that basically animated the whole world, because the world is alive. It's not a mechanism for sure. And yeah, it's important for me when I take walks in the park or even sit inside my house and I look out at the rain outside. It's really key for me to allow myself to hear the music behind the raindrops on the window, because that's exactly what prayer is. Because everything that I say to God in response will be a response, basically. It's a response, basically. The prayer will just sparkle. It will be kindled in the moment of encountering that music, which is there. And I'm not really good at formulaic prayers, even though I like some prayers. I like the way that they are formulated, but I really try to be sensitive to what the words of a prayer do, how they affect me, what they do to me, because there are some prayers that don't do much to me, but there are some that really, even there's a couple of words in the Psalms of David, for example, "Be still and know that I'm God." It's Psalm 46. So that words, "be still" and "know," really, I mean, I can feel they do work something in me just by the way I breathe when I say that. So I don't know if it answers your question though.
I know it's a big topic probably, but just was curious. And there is one more thing that I wanted to ask. Maybe there isn't a short answer or any answer, but I had an interesting experience with someone here who is my tango teacher, and he's over 80 years old. And he shared with me once that he had this spell that came from Germanic times. And this was a spell just against warts on the skin. And so I said, if you want, I can share with you and you can learn it. And then there was this whole way how he had to record it for me because it was just hard to find the rhythm. And he said that this is the rhythm. It's like a song that you have to learn with its energy. And I was wondering if there is anything about spells.
Yeah,
You can share.
that's true. There are two ways to use a language, and in both cases, words can be spells. Like for example, what Mao Zedong said about the dynamite sticks. That's exactly how the Communist Party of China used words that like spells, is they put people under a spell through saying a certain thing, and that's how the medieval witches in all ages, actually. But that's how they did it as well. And even I remember from the Soviet times, like meeting some people whose words, for some reason, pierce me, with some either something good or something bad. But that's because that's the power of language, generally. But of course, I mean, or you take any propaganda. All propaganda are spells. It's just their base. That's the basis of propaganda. We think it's just words, but it's spells. They put us under a spell, and we don't really question anything after being under the spell. And basically, I mean, I think for me the best way to feel to be protected from bad spells, because they're all over, is to immerse myself in good spells, like be enchanted, because that's actually another theme in the Inklings, the re-enchantment of the world. The world has been disenchanted by, this materialistic worldview, Darwinism and Marxism, all kinds of isms, and also the whole pseudo-scientific consciousness of the modern world, where we don't allow ourselves to see more, to look beyond matter. And so the re-enchantment of the world is basically the remedy against the bad spells out there, evil spells out there. And if you look at how many movies are made around these themes nowadays, bad spells, and it's just interesting that what we look and what we witness in the world today is not like a clash between politics or cultures or anything. It's just a clash between spells, because some people will say one thing and it's so powerful that they have so many followers all over the world. And other people say something entirely different and it has so much power over their followers. So these people clash and there's division, but it's basically a division between two types of spells, I guess, maybe more than two types of spells. But certainly for myself, I think I want to be protected by living under the right spell. So the good spell that enchants me and allows me to feel that prayer and live that prayer as well.
Well, that is such profound now realization. We do live in the times of spells.
Yep, definitely.
So to finish it up, be mindful of the time. How do you re-enchant yourself? Do you have a couple practical tips besides reading the English?
Well, reading and writing, definitely. But I think any form of art for me is writing and actually talking to good people about these things is also, conversations. I think it was Alexander Pyatigorski, a Russian philosopher, who said that if I learn there's someone out there with whom I can have a good conversation, I'm ready to crawl there on all fours. And that's part of my spiritual nourishment, that when I try to seek out interesting and good spiritual people to talk to, for sure. And then also any form of art or creativity that really makes me alive. So I try to be sensitive to what makes me alive internally. And then, so I engage in that. But also seeing how other people express their own creativity as well. Because when you observe other people in their prayer state, when they attune themselves to the breath of God, it works on you as well. It does something to you. So we really need this community of like-minded people who walk in that breath, walk in that ambience, in that understanding, and then we're able to be pulled into that enchantment ourselves.
Yeah. Find people to subgrade with, people, beings.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, that was a very enchanting conversation.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. It's I always look forward to good conversation like this one.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to The Breath of Life. It means a lot to me. If something in this conversation touched you, consider sharing it with someone and connecting in the process. Follow The Breath of Life for new episodes and join me on Substack, where I publish my weekly writings. The link is in the show notes. Till next time.